Subungual lividity. Black fingernails as blood pooling evidence. A forensic analysis of post-mortem blood. Settling and what discoloration reveals about cause of death. When we examine autopsy photographs and documentation with attention to details that are rarely discussed, we confront something that whispers about the precise mechanism of death, the darkening of the fingernails. In JonBenet's autopsy, the documentation notes that fingernails were of sufficient length for clipping, a simple clinical observation. But what the photographs reveal is more complex. The nail beds appear darker than the surrounding skin. This is not dirt. This is not trauma. This is blood pooling in a very specific location, following very specific post-mortem physics. This darkening of the nail beds, what pathologists call subungual lividity, is evidence of where blood settled after the heart stopped. It is a map of circulation in the moment death occurred. And what this map reveals contradicts assumptions about how the final moments unfolded. The physics of blood pooling, how livor mortis forms. After death, the heart stops. Blood no longer circulates. Gravity becomes the only force acting on blood in the body. Blood settles to the lowest points. It pools. It creates discoloration called livor mortis, literally the death stain. This is one of the first and most consistent post-mortem changes. Where blood settles depends on body position. If a body lies on its back, blood settles to the dorsal surface, the back. If a body sits upright, blood settles to the lower extremities. If a body is at an angle, blood settles accordingly. Livor mortis typically becomes visible within 30 minutes to 2 hours of death. It becomes darker and more fixed over the following 8 to 12 hours. After this point, the discoloration no longer blanches. Pressing on it does not make it fade, because the blood has leaked from capillaries into surrounding tissue. The autopsy report notes dorsal 3+ to 4+, livor mortis, which is non-blanching. Livor mortis is also present on the right side of the face. This is important. The primary livor mortis is on the back, dorsal surface. Secondary livor mortis is on the right side of the face. This pattern tells us about body position at the time of death. But the fingernails are different. The nail bed darkening, subungual lividity, is a more specific indicator. It shows blood pooling in capillaries specifically beneath the nail tissue. Why fingernails show discoloration differently. The nail bed, the tissue beneath the nail, is a location where capillary beds are particularly visible. The tissue is thin. The blood vessels are close to the surface. The nail itself is translucent enough that blood beneath it becomes visible through the keratin layers. Subungual lividity appears when blood pools in these capillaries. The dark appearance is caused by deoxygenated hemoglobin, blood that has been deprived of oxygen and has oxidized to a darker color. In a hanging or strangulation scenario, the darkening of fingernails can be particularly pronounced. This is because the hands often end up in a dependent position, hanging down from a body suspended or partially suspended. Gravity pulls blood downward. The capillaries in the fingers, particularly at the nail beds, become engorged. Additionally, in asphyxiation, venous return to the heart is compromised. Blood backs up in the body. It cannot efficiently return from the extremities. This creates venous engorgement, a buildup of blood in the hands and feet. The combination of gravity, body position with hands dependent, and venous engorgement, caused by asphyxiation, means blood accumulates in the fingernail capillaries with particular intensity. The darkening becomes pronounced. The fingernails appear black or very dark purple in photographs and at autopsy. The distinction: dirt, trauma, and actual lividity. We must carefully distinguish between three phenomena that could darken fingernails, dirt or discoloration from external sources. This would be superficial. It would be on the nail surface, not beneath the nail. It could be rubbed away. It would not have the pattern of true livor mortis, trauma or scratching. If nails were broken, if tissue was damaged, there could be discoloration from bleeding into the wound. But this would typically be localized to the site of injury. It would not affect all nail beds uniformly. Subungual lividity from blood pooling. This would affect the nail beds uniformly. It would be beneath the nail, showing through the translucent keratin. It would follow the pattern of gravity and body position. It would be consistent with post-mortem blood settling. The key forensic distinction is that true lividity follows gravitational patterns and does not blanch, does not fade when pressed, after it becomes fixed. If we examine photographs and see darkening of all fingernails in a consistent pattern, we are looking at subungual lividity. We are looking at evidence of where blood pooled after death. Hypoxia and fingernail, darkening, the intensification mechanism. In asphyxiation, hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, creates several physiological changes that intensify fingernail darkening. First, as oxygen becomes unavailable to cells, blood cannot fully oxygenate. Hemoglobin that would normally be bright red, when oxygenated remains dark red or purple as deoxygenated hemoglobin. This creates darker discoloration. Second, hypoxia causes respiratory acidosis, a buildup of carbon dioxide in the blood. This acidic environment causes capillaries to dilate. Blood vessels enlarge. More blood is retained in small capillaries, including those in the nail beds. Third, in strangulation specifically, venous return is blocked. The jugular vein, the major vein returning blood from the head and upper body, is compressed. Blood backs up into the head, neck, and upper extremities. It cannot efficiently return to the heart. This creates venous engorgement. Venous engorgement means the capillaries in the hands and fingers become significantly engorged with blood. The pressure in these capillaries increases. More blood fills these spaces. The combination of hypoxia-induced dark hemoglobin, which appears more purple-dark, respiratory acidosis-induced capillary dilation, which allows more blood to accumulate, and venous engorgement, which fills these capillaries under pressure, creates a particularly dark appearance in the nail beds. Subungual lividity in asphyxiation is therefore typically darker and more pronounced than it might be in other causes of death. The darkness itself becomes evidence of the mechanism, oxygen deprivation combined with venous backup. Pediatric visibility. Why children's nail bed changes are particularly visible. In young children, the nail beds show color changes more visibly than in adults. A child's fingernails are thinner. The keratin layer is less opaque. Blood discoloration beneath thin nails shows through more clearly. A child's nail beds have thinner skin overlying them. The vascular beds are more superficial. Blood pooling in these vessels is closer to the surface, more visible. A child's capillary system is more responsive to hypoxia. Capillaries dilate more readily when oxygen becomes scarce. Capillaries in the extremities, particularly in fingernail beds, become engorged more obviously. A child's body composition, with less subcutaneous fat, less muscle mass, means that post-mortem changes manifest more clearly and more quickly. The visual signs of blood pooling appear more sharply defined. This means that in a 6-year-old child, subungual lividity would be particularly visible. The darkening of the nail beds would be obvious to anyone examining the body. It would appear in photographs clearly. The autopsy report and photographs document this. The darkening is present. It is documented. It is part of the post-mortem record. What fingernail? Discoloration reveals about body position. The pattern and intensity of subungual lividity provides information about body position at the time of death and in the hours immediately following death. If the hands are in a dependent position, hanging down from the body, or positioned below the heart, Blood drains downward into the hands by gravity. Fingernails show pronounced discoloration. If the hands are elevated above the heart, blood drains away from them. Fingernail discoloration would be minimal. The fact that JonBenet's fingernails show darkening suggests her hands were in a dependent or semi-dependent position, not elevated, but hanging or held below the heart, at the time of death and immediately after. This is consistent with a body that wasn't lying flat on its back, but rather positioned where the hands were below the head and heart. It is consistent with a hanging or with the body in an upright or semi-upright position before being moved. The intensity and uniformity of the discoloration tells us about sustained dependency, not a brief moment, but hours of blood pooling under gravity. When the body was found in the basement, in a supine position on its back, on a blanket with hands over the head, this position was not the position at death. The body had been moved. The livor mortis pattern, on the back and on the right side of the face, combined with the subungual lividity in the fingernails, maps out a different position at the moment of death than the position in which the body was found. Livor mortis patterns as evidence of movement. When a body is moved after livor mortis becomes fixed, the original pattern remains. New livor mortis may form in the new position, but only in areas where the body is now dependent. The original pattern doesn't disappear. We have primary livor mortis on the dorsal, back surface. We have secondary livor mortis on the right side of the face. We have pronounced subungual lividity in the fingernails. The dorsal livor mortis suggests the body was on its back when liver fixed. But the secondary liver on the right side of the face suggests the body was also positioned with the face turned or tilted to the right at some point. The subungual lividity suggests the hands were dependent, hanging below the heart. These patterns are difficult to reconcile with a single simple body position. They suggest the body was in at least two different positions during the critical period when livor mortis was developing and fixing, approximately the first 8 to 12 hours after death. Movement of the body would explain this. A body moved from one position to another, with livor developing and partially fixing in each position before the next movement, would show this mixed pattern. The forensic question this raises: when was the body moved? How long after death did movement occur? If movement occurred immediately after death, before liver had fixed, the original position would be largely obliterated. But we see evidence of the original position in the secondary liver and subungual findings. This suggests the body was moved hours after death, long enough for liver to partially or fully fix in the original position, then moved to the position in which it was found. Hypoxia markers: what the nail beds tell us about cause of death. The intensity of subungual lividity, particularly when pronounced and uniform across both hands, is often associated with asphyxiation. The dark purple color specifically suggests oxygen deprivation. Other post-mortem signs support this. The autopsy notes petechial hemorrhages, small burst blood vessels, in the eyes, neck, and on the lungs. These are classic asphyxiation findings. Petechial hemorrhages occur when capillaries burst due to increased venous pressure. In strangulation or hanging, venous return is blocked or severely restricted. Pressure builds up in capillaries. They rupture. Tiny blood extravasations appear as red or purple pinpoint dots. The presence of petechial hemorrhages combined with pronounced subungual lividity creates a consistent picture: death by asphyxiation. But the autopsy report notes two causes: asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. Both the ligature around the neck, evidence of strangulation, and the skull fracture are documented. Both contributed to death. The question that the nail bed darkening raises is timing. What was the sequence? Was the asphyxiation causing death when the head trauma occurred? Or was the head trauma first, and then asphyxiation was used to ensure death. The intensity of subungual lividity, the degree of oxygen deprivation indicated by the dark coloration, suggests significant asphyxiation. Significant enough that the body was already moving toward death through oxygen deprivation when other injuries occurred. The forensic principle: body position at death versus position at discovery. When livor mortis patterns do not match the body position at discovery, we have evidence that the body was moved. JonBenet's body was found supine, on her back, on a blanket, in the wine cellar. Her hands were positioned over her head. Her arms were extended upward. But the livor mortis, the blood pooling pattern, shows the back and the right side of the face darkened, and the subungual lividity shows pronounced darkening in the fingernails. This pattern is not consistent with a body lying on its back, with arms extended over the head. In that position, the hands would be elevated. Blood would drain away from them. Subungual lividity would be minimal. Instead, the findings are consistent with a body that was in a different position when death occurred or was imminent. A position where the hands were dependent, possibly hanging or held below the heart. This is not a small detail. This is evidence of movement. This is evidence that the body's current position is not its death position. The body was arranged. The body was staged. What nail bed darkening reveals about consciousness at death? The intensity of post-mortem changes, particularly in the fingernails, can provide information about consciousness level at the time of death. In deep unconsciousness or death from a massive traumatic event, blood pressure drops rapidly. Hemoglobin does not fully deoxygenate. Post-mortem lividity may be lighter, more pink than dark. In strangulation or prolonged asphyxiation, consciousness is maintained longer. The body struggles. Respiration continues briefly even as oxygen supply is cut off. Hemoglobin becomes progressively more deoxygenated. Blood backs up in veins. Capillaries become engorged. The result is dark, pronounced lividity, and pronounced subungual discoloration. The pronounced darkening in JonBenet's nail beds suggests she was conscious long enough for significant hypoxia to develop, long enough for blood to back up in veins and engorge capillaries. This is consistent with strangulation, where consciousness is maintained as the brain is deprived of oxygen, but the person cannot move, cannot breathe, cannot call for help. It is less consistent with instantaneous death from a blow. A massive head injury causing instantaneous death might not allow time for this level of post-mortem lividity to develop. The nailbed evidence suggests she experienced asphyxiation consciously for a period before death. The autopsy documentation and what was recorded. The autopsy report mentions fingernails. The fingernails of both hands are of sufficient length for clipping. This is a clinical observation, nothing more. It notes the nails had not been bitten or worn down. It is the kind of routine notation made during any autopsy. But the photographs tell a different story. The photographs document the darkening of the nail beds. The darkening is present. It is documented. It exists in the photographic record. What is not explicitly analyzed in the written report is what this darkening means, what it reveals about post-mortem physiology, what it indicates about body position, what it suggests about cause of death timing and mechanism. This is where careful forensic analysis must go beyond what was written and examine what was recorded in images. The nail beds are dark. This is subungual lividity. This is blood pooling in a specific pattern. This pattern maps out the body's position and the physiological state at death. The consistency between nail bed findings and official cause of death. The official cause of death is asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. The nail bed evidence Pronounced subungual lividity, indicating dark deoxygenated blood pooled in fingernail capillaries, is consistent with asphyxiation. The presence of petechial hemorrhages, burst capillaries from venous pressure backup, is consistent with asphyxiation. The presence of a garret around the neck is consistent with strangulation. These elements align. They form a consistent picture of death by asphyxiation from neck constriction. But the livor mortis pattern, with secondary discoloration on the right side of the face and pronounced subungual lividity, suggests a body position at death different from the position at discovery. This inconsistency raises a question about staging and body movement. The evidence suggests the body was moved after death. After livor mortis had partially or fully formed in an original position, the body was relocated. It was placed on a blanket in the wine cellar. It was arranged with hands extended over the head. This arrangement is not how a body would naturally fall if it died in place. This is positioning. This is staging. Why nail bed darkening? Matters for understanding. What happened when we examine the full constellation of post-mortem findings, the livor mortis pattern, the subungual lividity, the petechial hemorrhages, the garrote, the location where the body was found? We pieced together a timeline. Death occurred. Blood pooled, according to gravity and the body's position at that moment. The body was in a position where the hands were dependent. The face was turned or tilted to the right. The back was pressured against a surface. This was not the wine cellar. This was somewhere else in the home. Hours passed. Livor mortis developed and became fixed. The body did not move during this window. Then the body was relocated, moved from its death position to the wine cellar, arranged on a blanket, positioned supine with hands over the head. This movement would have occurred after liver began to fix, because we see evidence of the original position in the liver pattern. The nail bed darkening is part of this forensic map. The darkness beneath the nails is a record written in blood of where that body was and how it was oriented when death's final moments unfolded. What we understand from looking carefully at darkened fingernails. The fingernails appear dark in photographs. This is not dirt. This is not trauma. This is subungual lividity. Subungual lividity is blood pooling in capillaries beneath translucent nail beds. It appears dark because the blood has been deprived of oxygen. The darkening is more pronounced in children because their nail beds are thinner and more transparent. The presence and intensity of subungual lividity tells us the body was in a position where the hands were dependent, below the heart, when death occurred. The person experienced significant hypoxia, oxygen deprivation, creating dark, deoxygenated blood. The person maintained consciousness long enough for this level of discoloration to develop, consistent with strangulation rather than instantaneous death. The body was moved after death, after livor mortis partially or fully developed. The body was positioned differently for discovery than it was at death. All of this is written in the darkening of the fingernails. All of this is documented in the autopsy photographs. We have been looking at it. We simply have not been reading it.
Okay, so for 2 seconds, we might get a little technical. Okay, so because I like sort of using the autopsy to pinpoint activity, like body movements, body stopping, where was the pineapple when whatever it was, a fruit cocktail, though I don't believe that. It's not in any official source that I can find, so I don't say it. But whatever, if we're thinking about a fruit cocktail, it doesn't matter. The position of the fruit cocktail at the time of death, when the body stops, it tells us, okay, now that this stops, this is when this clock starts. And we can work backwards, because you could tell me one thing. Oh man, I think she died at this point in time. Great. But the autopsy report might suggest something a little different. And for a long time, I've just had concerns. I ran into a forum on Reddit a long time ago. And not only that, but I ran into a video that I did a review of long time ago, probably like a year ago, something like that. And the guy was talking about how JonBenet's body had been moved after death. And you know what's interesting is that, you know, sometimes you get a lot of blowback and pushback in this on some of the things, like the chronic inappropriateness, right? That is in the autopsy report, that John and Patsy got fired up at even being asked a question. I don't give a crap if you get fired up about it. It still needs an answer. Did that crap with Lou Smith. Lou Smith was asking you about the pineapple and you throw a fit. I don't know is not an answer. We asking you what logical criminal would sit down for tea and a bite of pineapple. What? Who does that? And all you have to say is, oh, I don't know. He had that much time? I mean, well, dang. Why didn't you just come right out and shake your hand when you guys walked in? Oh, hey, guys. Welcome back home. Good to see you. I'll just be down here in the basement working on my wood horse. Gotta be kidding me. So, anyways, I like to look at this because despite what people say, we can understand a little bit more about the possibility of what happened, given the body, what the body says. So, subungual lividity and the pooling and how it works. So, and I this is kind of new to me because I'm always talking about rigor mortis, and then I was thinking I was getting into liver mortis, and now it's this new buzz term, subungual lividity. Forgive me. So here's my discrepancy with this. We're examining sort of like the darkening of JonBenet's fingernails in this after she dies, which is subungual lividity, which is this idea that the blood pools in the body after death based on gravity and the body's position. Listen to me. Because we can go on a newscast and we can say whatever we want. We can go on a podcast. We can say whatever we want. We can go to a conference and we can say whatever we want. We can run all about town. Anywhere where they'll put a microphone in our face and we can say whatever we want. But at some point in time, somebody with a brain needs to start asking the facts. Needs to start thinking factually. Just ask a factual question. As long this case has been 30 years. As long as this case has been, has anybody asked John or Burke or John Ramsey or any of the friends who were close about anything in the autopsy report this in depth? Because we can ask about the chronic allegations. We got that. And people can say, I don't know. Cool. Well, let me tell you what it means. Because it's a lot of I don't know. Blood pooling in the body after death based on gravity and the body position. That means at some point in time, however you have her positioned, that's where the blood is going to go. And the longer she stays there, that's where it's going to sit. The dark nails suggest her hands were hanging down below her heart when she died. But her body was found lying on her back with hands over her head, which is a completely different position. This discrepancy indicates the body was moved after death from one position to another. And so, of course, you know, I wanted to kind of do just a little bit of research on this to understand a little bit more about, like, okay, how long does it take for the lividity, in this case, this kind of lividity, to set in? Subungual lividity, blood pooling under the nails, is a component of general postmortem lividity, also known as livor mortis, I guess, and typically becomes fixed, meaning it will not shift or disappear when the body is moved. And this happens approximately 8 to 12 hours after death. While lividity begins shortly after death, within 20-30 minutes to 2 hours, it remains unfixed or blanchable. You remember in the autopsy report, you probably saw, if you go back and read it again, some spots where Dr. Meyer talked about non-blanching parts, right? That means that it was fixed at that point. It ain't moving. So whatever he was talking about that was non-blanchable, that means it ain't moving. It's stuck there. Okay. But this remains for 20 to 30 minutes, maybe up to 2 hours. It remains unfixed or blanchable for the first. It remains unfixed or blanchable for the first several hours, meaning the blood can redistribute if the body is moved. Okay. Key factors regarding fixation time frame. The process of blood settling into the tissues and becoming fixed usually takes 6 to 12 hours, with 8 to 12 hours being the most commonly cited time frame for complete fixation. The fixed state, once it is fixed, applying pressure to the area known as blanching will not turn the skin white, and turning the body over will not cause the blood to move to a new dependent area. If a body is kept in a cold environment, fixation can be delayed for up to 24 to 36 hours. Conversely, a warm environment can accelerate the process. Because subungual areas, such as under the fingernails and the toenails, under the fingernails and the toenails are small, blood pooling there follows the same general timeline as peripheral livor mortis, becoming immobile and fixed around the 8 to 12 hour mark. If a person is moved before the 8 to 12 hour mark, a second or a dual lividity pattern may appear where blood pools in the new dependent area or areas. You know, I've never been good at math. So I'm just going to ask ChatGPT. If subungual lividity takes 8 to 12 hours to set in to where it's fixed, let's say at the earliest 8 hours to set in. If John Ramsey found JonBenet at 1 p.m., 1:05 p.m., if we use the 8-hour timeline, also give me the 12-hour timeline. How long or what time was it that the lividity, or the subungual lividity at least, set in? I just want to know. If you're anchoring lividity at the time John found her, 1:05 p.m., and you're using the assumption fixed 8 to 12 hours, then you can just count backwards. Yeah, I know, but I want you to count for me, ChatGPT. Using an 8-hour minimum, 1 p.m., you'd probably get 5 a.m. Obviously, at 1:05, counting 8 hours back, you would get 5:05 a.m. Huh. 5 in the morning. Earliest, you probably get 5 o'clock to 5:05. Using the 12-hour upper bound, at 1 p.m., 12 hours, you probably get 1 a.m. is when it starts to set in, or when it started. 1:05 obviously be, 1:05 p.m. You count back 12 hours, that would be 1:05 a.m. I knew that. I just wanted chat to tell me so I could make sure my math was correct. So under that setup, the window for when it would have set in or become fixed is probably about 1 a.m. or 1:05 a.m. So probably somewhere between 1 a.m., 1:05 and 5 a.m., 5:05 a.m. So I think what this tells us, because I'm trying to understand more about the body position, because this is a mismatch. This is the discrepancy. This is a mismatch because we're seeing her hands over her head, with this rope on one hand, tied around one hand, but the livor mortis in and of itself shows that blood is settling in her back and as the autopsy says, on her back and on the right side. Those are the patterns that I think Linda Arndt kind of pointed out. But now we're looking at some sort of patterns in her fingernails, which suggests that her hands were below her heart, not up like this, so that the blood would flow down. And if we think about the lividity pattern where she's on her back and on the right side pulling, then that means that she was lying on her back, slightly rolled or angled toward the right, and her hands were down and not elevated. And she was in that position for hours undisturbed. And I'm talking about hours. So, and I want to walk this down real quick, and I want to close it down with this idea. So, if we say that lividity set in, JonBenet was found at 1 p.m., okay? And we say that if we assume the time of death was 12:30, 30 minutes after midnight, 12:30 a.m., And from what we can tell in the research, lividity begins roughly 20 to 30 minutes to 2 hours after death. Subungual lividity forms early and reflects dependent positioning. Fixation of this occurs 8 hours minimum. Minimum. Okay, I'm being generous. It occurs 8 hours minimum. So if JonBenet is found at 1 p.m., where Linda Arndt is detecting lividity and liver mortis present when when JonBenet is carried upstairs, and we work forward from this time of death from 12:30 in the morning, then that means between 1 to 2 a.m. the lividity is actively forming. Her hands are down. She's on her back and slightly to her right. Subungual lividity is sort of establishing during this point. And at this time, there's no meaningful repositioning at this point. Okay. She's not being moved. From what I understand, she's not being moved at all. So we go 8 hours from this, 8 hours from 12:30, and you're sitting around 4:35 in the morning. And so lividity is fixed. From this point forward, the blood won't repool. If you try to elevate the arms, then that's not going to change where the blood forms in the fingernails. So positioning won't change any sort of lividity. So the problem becomes that if lividity is fixed by 5 in the morning, then everything inconsistent with that position, with her being on her back, on her right side, hands down to her side, everything consistent or everything inconsistent with that position had to happen after, which means that her arms had to be raised over her head after 4:35 in the morning, 4:30 or 5 in the morning. The wrist cord was applied after that point. Clothing was adjusted after that point. Placement in the wine cellar and sort of the final concealment happened after that point. So here's the discrepancy. Here's the problem then. If that was at 5 in the morning, and John said he woke up at 5:25 a.m. And he goes and he gets in the shower, and Patsy, she gets up and she starts walking down the stairs. She gets, she's ready in like 7 to 10 minutes. She wakes up at 5:30 and she's walking down the steps at 5:40, and she's, 5:45. So far, this guy has had time to sort of move around, because he could not have, JonBenet could not have passed away. I'm saying 1 at 12:30 a.m. or 1 in the morning, because it takes time for the lividity to set in. So JonBenet could not have passed at 5 in the morning. It had to be closer to 12:30 a.m., 1 a.m. that she passed, to allow the time, at least to allow the time for lividity to set in. That's what I'm saying. So that means that this entire time, the intruder has been sitting there. What has he been doing? We go from, say, 1 in the morning. Let's say 1 in the morning. You did this, you're in shock. 1 in the morning. Let's start at 1. 2, 3, 4, 5 for 4 hours. You got that right? 2, 3, 4, 5 for 4 hours. You're just sitting there in shock, collecting material, collecting resources. I'm not sure what you're doing, but JonBenet is not being moved. So this criminal that was highly interactive with JonBenet for the entirety of his time, these criminals that were highly interactive with JonBenet for the entirety of the time that she was alive, all of a sudden stopped interacting with her completely after she died. She's laying there untouched, unmoved, and it takes them 4 hours to realize that they want to go through with this kidnapping thing or this kidnapping angle and place the note on the steps. You have 4 hours to decide, how do I want to move forward with this? Because I have a note, according to John, it was written before. I have a note that says that we plan to kidnap, but that ain't gonna happen. And so for some reason, the criminals thought it better just to leave her in the house instead of taking her and doing something different, going a different direction. They decided to just, it's better to leave her in the house and let the parents find her. And so John is up at 5:25 in the morning. He's running the shower. You probably hear that downstairs. You hear the water, you hear the water heater, and the kind of going through the pipes and stuff like that. So something's up. We all know that. We all know that sound. Patsy gets up. She walks down the stairs. She's picking up clothes and checking the dryer and all such as that. And then you hear Patsy screaming. You're still down there, right? Because at this point, we know police are going to arrive at 6 o'clock in the morning. Fleet White's going to get there at 6:10 in the morning. He's going to go immediately down to the basement. So that means you have about, if you're doing the staging at 5 o'clock in the morning, you have about an hour and 10 minutes to get up out of there. You add 30 minutes to that, you have about almost 2 hours. I don't know if that's sufficient to stage a body and do everything that is, but if you're moving quickly, you have 2 hours to you see what I'm saying? That would mean that the criminal sat there for 4 hours, didn't make a move. But when they heard the commotion in the house, John's up taking a shower, the note is found, Patsy starts screaming. They're in the middle of, but at the time, they're in the middle of redressing her. And that means that they have to have everything down there. They have to have a wash rag to wipe her down. They have to have the Barbie nightgown and the blanket from her bed down there with her. Because what it suggests is they picked her up. What's really weird to me? I still don't understand this blanket thing, because that would suggest that the blanket didn't seem, or no one said it looks like the blanket had been ripped off of the bed. So it would seem as if the blanket was already off of the bed. And so they wrapped JonBenet, so that means JonBenet and the Barbie nightgown would already have to be down there in the basement of some sort. Okay? Down in the basement of some sort. And I got an idea. I'm not going to say it, but I got an idea. But the Barbie nightgown and the sheet are down there in the basement, and her change of clothes are going to be down there in the basement as well when they redress her. All of that's down there. The criminal feels some need to not only put the cover over JonBenet, just as a cover over, but they feel the need to put the cover under JonBenet so that it wraps all the way around. But mind you, the criminal went through extra steps to move her rigor mortis laced arms that were stiff and hard to move, and her legs into position to where it looked like she was being taken out. It took the criminal 4 hours to figure that out and say, you know what, that's what I want to do. To me, it would make sense that the criminal would say, you know what, I'm going to go ahead and do it. I'm going to go ahead and drag her and move her here, this, that, and the third. Wherever JonBenet was, whatever she was doing, and it kind of makes you wonder, because you remember the urine spot that's in front of the wine cellar door. It kind of makes you wonder if JonBenet was over there and then maybe she was dragged to another place or what have you. But this don't make no sense. It seems to be the case that she was moved or she was tampered with around 4:35 a.m. in the morning. Activity came. That activity had to stop by 6:10 in the morning because Fleet White went down there. And it had to be done for sure because not only that, but this person had to be done. They had to put JonBenet in the wine cellar, and then they had to go into the train room and move the boxes and the chairs behind them, and then go out. Officer French is out front. They have to navigate around Officer French, and then they have to, at some point in time, as they have done this thing, at some point in time, they had to have taken the bat, put it outside of the butler's kitchen. They do that. They take the bat, they put it outside of the butler's kitchen. They take the note, they put it on the spiral staircase. They're setting up, they're moving. So that could have been going on in the 4-hour period. They're sitting there making the garrote. That could have happened in the 4-hour period. And they're saying, you know what, this is what we want to do. We're going to put the blanket around her. We're going to change her clothes, which means that the clothes that were down, those clothes had to have been, that means that if they're going to do this, they had to do it in isolation. So that means either they said, you know what, we're bringing an extra pair of clothes for her. Whatever clothes she was wearing, they said, we're bringing an extra pair of clothes for her. And we're going to put her in, you know, whatever. So that means that the criminals, again, ever the polite, considerate criminals, you know, they thought about her, giving her food before they left on the long journey to you know, kidnapping. They thought about her that much to give her pineapple. And now they're like, you know what, JonBenet, let's bring your blankie. So considerate. You know what, JonBenet, let's bring you an extra pair of clothes. We're going to be gone for a while. So those clothes had to be down in the basement. Unless. Well, anyways, I think I made my point. We'll see you on the next run.